In the heart of ancient Rome, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, a strange and almost sacred bond formed between a city and a bird. It was in the year 35, on the roof of the Temple of Castor and Pollux, where a group of ravens had made their nest high above the Roman Forum. One young raven left the nest, possibly a little too soon, and landed at a shoemaker's stall directly below. The shoemaker found it on the ground and took the bird in. From that day on, he raised the raven in his shop. And as it grew, so did its vocabulary. Before long, the bird had a morning routine of flying from the shoemaker's shop to the rostra, the platform where Rome's leaders gave speeches. Once there, it would cry out, loud and clear, the names of Caesar and Tiberius. It even learned the names of the emperor's sons, Germanicus and Drusus, and called out to them as they passed by. Then it would greet ordinary citizens too, repeating friendly phrases before flying home again to the shoemaker. The people of Rome were fascinated. This wasn't just a trained bird. It felt like something more. Some called it a good omen. Others believed it was touched by the gods. Crowds gathered to hear it speak. The raven became part of daily life, a strange little celebrity in the heart of the empire. But not everyone loved it. They say that fame breeds envy. In this case, it's true, even between a human and a bird. One morning, another shoemaker in the town killed the raven. His excuse was that the bird had gone to the bathroom in a pair of sandals, but people knew it was out of spite and jealousy of the business the raven brought his competitor. The backlash was immediate and brutal. The man was driven out of the neighborhood, hunted by the crowd, and ultimately killed. As for the raven, it was mourned like royalty. A funeral procession was held. 2 Ethiopian attendants bore the bird's body on a litter strewn with flowers. A piper played solemn tunes as the crowd walked in silence along the Appian Way. The raven was cremated with honors in the field of ridiculous, an area reserved for the curious, the mythic, the out of place. Pliny the Elder, who recorded the event decades later, couldn't help but note the irony. This bird, this talking raven, received more reverence than Scipio Aemilianus, the general who raised Carthage and helped shape Rome's destiny. When he had died, there were only a few that mourned him. But for the raven, the city wept. Maybe it was the novelty, or that people saw it as a kind of sacred messenger, or maybe it reminded them of something pure, something untouched by politics, war, or betrayal. A voice from nature that belonged to no one, but for a brief moment, seemed to speak for everyone. Deep in France's Argonne forest, during October of 1918, in the final brutal weeks of World War I, more than 500 American soldiers were trapped. Rain soaked the trees, mud was up to their ankles, they were surrounded, starving, and on top of all that were being shelled by their own side. They were part of the United States 77th Division, later known as the Lost Battalion. Isolated behind enemy lines, they had lost radio contact, and to the American artillery teams miles away they looked like German troops, and the shells kept falling. Major Charles Whittlesey had one last way to send a message, his homing pigeons. He released them, one at a time, but German snipers were waiting. Every bird was shot down. Every bird except for one. Her name was Cher Ami, which means dear friend in French. She was small, under a pound, with a message canister tied to her leg. Inside was a desperate plea. We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. Major Whittlesey let her go, but she didn't make it far before enemy fire struck her down as well. Cher Ami dropped from the sky, but then, against all odds, she started flying again. Cher Ami was wounded, bleeding, flying low and fast, but she pushed through. 25 miles of enemy territory in just 25 minutes. When she landed at U.S. headquarters, she was barely alive. She'd been shot through the chest, one of her eyes was gone, and one of her legs was nearly severed, but the message was still there. And because of her, the shelling stopped, and 194 men were saved. Army medics patched her up. They made her a tiny wooden leg. She survived, and was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French military for her bravery. Back in the U.S., she became a national hero. Her story spread across newspapers, and children wrote letters to Cher Ami. Cher Ami died the following year, but her body was preserved and placed in the Smithsonian, where she remains today. Not just a bird, but a symbol of hope. After the First World War, many Australian veterans had been given land in the wheat belt to farm. They soon found their farms, located in Western Australia's Campion district, under siege. not by a foreign adversary, but by thousands of emus. In 1932, over 20,000 emus, massive flightless birds nearly 6 feet tall, migrated inland from the coast, drawn by the newly tapped water sources and freshly planted grain fields. To the desperate farmers, already feeling the strain from the Great Depression, it was like watching their future literally being pecked apart one stalk at a time. The farmers begged for help, and the Australian government responded with soldiers. Armed with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, a small detachment from the Royal Australian Artillery was deployed to the fields in November 1932. The press gave it a name with equal parts mockery and fascination: the Great Emu War. What followed was chaos. The emus were faster than expected, more evasive. They moved in unpredictable ways and patterns. Machine gun fire often missed entirely or took down only a handful of the birds before the flocks disappeared into the brush. At one point, the soldiers mounted a gun to a truck, hoping to chase down the birds. But the terrain was too rough, and that plan failed. A local paper wrote about the event: "The emus have proven that they are not only faster than a speeding bullet, but better organized than our finest troops." After several weeks and over 2,500 rounds of ammunition fired, only around 1,000 birds of the starting 20,000 had been confirmed killed. The rest scattered, regrouped, and returned, unbothered. By December, the government quietly pulled the operation. The military had lost to birds. The whole thing became a punchline in history books, but beneath the humor is something sobering: a reflection of a country struggling to manage its wildlife, its land, and its people after war and depression. Oh, if you're wondering about the emus, they're still around, roaming the plains of Western Australia, undefeated. On the morning of November 20th, 1943, U.S. Marines stormed the beaches of Betio Island, part of the heavily fortified Tarawa Atoll in the Pacific. It was one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. Under relentless fire from entrenched Japanese defenders, the Marines fought tooth and nail for every inch of sand. But amid the chaos of mortars, machine guns, and a rising tide of casualties, waddled a duck. The duck had been won in a pub raffle in New Zealand by Sergeant Fagan of the 2nd Marine Division. Adopted as a unit mascot, the duck followed the Marines everywhere. She developed a taste for warm beer and an uncanny instinct for companionship, never straying far from Fagan's side. But when it came to battle, no one expected her to join, but that's exactly what she did. As Marines secured a tenuous foothold on the beaches, the duck reportedly locked eyes with an unexpected adversary, a Japanese rooster, likely left behind in the chaos. Without hesitation, she charged. Witnesses watched as the duck chased the rooster 30 feet up the beach, pecking and flapping furiously. In the middle of men battling for life, amidst the blood and war, the duck's fearless attack became a legend. She sustained a head injury in the scuffle but was later treated. The unit later awarded her a formal citation for bravery, describing her utter disregard for personal safety during fierce combat and praising her loyalty to her fellow Marines. After Tarawa, the duck sailed with the division through the Pacific. She was present at the Battle of Saipan and stormed ashore again at Tinian, where, according to Time magazine, she captured a tiny Japanese duck. When her time at war finally ended, she returned to the United States to a hero's welcome, appeared at war bond rallies, and eventually retired at Chicago's Lincoln Park Zoo. She ultimately died in 1954 of liver disease, likely from the same beer she once enjoyed beside her best friends. Today, the duck is preserved at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Virginia. Not as a joke or a curiosity, but as a reminder of how even in war, courage comes in the most unexpected forms. On September 10, 1945, in the small town of Fruita, Colorado, farmer Lloyd Olson walked into his yard with a mission: butcher a chicken for supper. He chose a 5.5-month-old Wyandotte rooster named Mike. With one clean swing of the axe, Olson struck the bird's neck. But Mike didn't die. He stumbled, yes. But then he stood up, balanced himself, and shook himself off. He even tried to preen, peck for food, and let out a garbled crow from the bloody stump where his head had been. I like to think that at that point most people would have put the creature out of its misery. But Olson didn't. He watched in disbelief as the bird kept going. And when Mike survived the night, and then another, Olson began to care for him. It turned out that the axe had missed the jugular vein, and a well-placed clot stopped the bleeding. And most crucially, the brainstem, responsible for controlling vital functions like breathing and heartbeat, remained intact. Mike was, in every medical sense, still alive. So Olsen began feeding him with an eyedropper, a mixture of milk and water dropped straight into the hole in his neck. He gave Mike bits of corn and worms. Mike the Headless Chicken became a national sensation. He was featured in Time and Life magazines and joined the sideshow circuit, sharing billing with two-headed calves and human oddities. People paid 25 cents just to see him up close. At the height of his fame, he earned Olsen $4,500 a month, the equivalent of over $60,000 a month today. He lived for 18 months after his decapitation. And then, in March 1947, while the Olsens were on tour in Phoenix, tragedy struck. Late at night in a motel room, Mike began choking. The couple had accidentally left their feeding syringe behind at a previous stop. They tried to help him, but without the tools, there was nothing they could do. In Fruita, Colorado, they still remember him. There's a statue in his honor. And every May, the town hosts a Mike the Headless Chicken Festival. Not out of morbid curiosity, but to celebrate the weird, wild resilience of one very strange bird.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.